Hello everyone and welcome to Placing Faces, the show where we sit down with some of the most influential casting directors in all of Hollywood and across the entertainment spectrum. I'm your host, Charlie Chappell, and today we get to sit down with casting director, art aficionado, and restaurateur John Papsidera. John has had a hell of a career already with his work on TV shows such as Westworld, Donovan, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Army Wives, just to name a few, as well as his work in the movies including Disney's Enchanted, The Dark Knight, The Prestige, Ender's Game, Interstellar, Jurassic World, Dunkirk. The list goes on and on and on and on. What's impressive to me about John's credits isn't just the size and quality of the productions that he's worked on, but the desperate natures. John is by no means a one-trick pony. We got a chance to chat with him at Automatic Sweat, his Culver City casting office / salon, an art gallery that he and his wife, Valerie, opened in 2003 in the hopes of creating an inviting, unpretentious art space, something that they seem to have succeeded at. John is a man that could easily be intimidating with his stature, impressive facial hair, and distinctly rock and roll southwestern styling, but he isn't. Partially because of his air of friendly, relaxed calm, and partially because of his stillness. He's kind and engaging, easy to talk to, and even easier to listen to, as you're about to discover. I hope that you enjoy our interview with John, and I hope that you learn as much as I did. First, I want to talk to you about art, because you've got...
About art?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay,
yeah,
sure.
because you have this amazing studio right next door.
Thanks, yeah.
That I briefly got to stick my head into, and now we're in this room where art is everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere, yeah.
And it seems to be a big
obsessive
part of your life, because you started this
gallery.
gallery.
Yeah.
Sorry, not studio,
Yeah,
gallery.
Yeah.
What, 5 years ago-ish?
Yeah, 4 or 5 years ago, when I moved into this space, and it was part of the reason why I really wanted to be in this space. I used to have a gallery years ago with 4 friends called Glue, and it was on Beverly Boulevard, and we loved it. It all came out of a passion. You know, I really kind of believe I'm incredibly lucky to do things that I'm passionate about, and casting is one, and art is another one, and restaurant and food is another one. I have a restaurant as well.
You do?
I do. So, you know, I'm incredible how many people in their lives can say they do things that they're passionate about, and those are their careers and pursuits.
Absolutely.
So I'm really lucky about that. So yes, I moved into this space, and part of the reason why I chose it is that I could get the gallery back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and with the studio, you started with your wife, if I'm not...
yeah, Valerie and I did this gallery together, yeah.
And on your website, it says you created this space to encourage artists in a relaxed and unpretentious atmosphere.
Yeah.
And that word, unpretentious, seems to be a very important word in that statement.
Yeah.
What is it about art that draws pretension? Is that the right? Would that be the right word?
So. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And how are you battling against that in a town that is known
full of pretension? Yeah. I mean, I think the philosophy, because I've collected for years, and I know I always felt less than going into a lot of galleries. You know, the people try and build the walls really high so that you don't see that it's just a 3-card Monty, you know? And so in showing work, the biggest thrill for me is, as a gallerist, is to show work that moves people, and or a collector that will buy their first piece ever in their life. And that's what's fun for me about it, exposing people to it. And that's what I find enjoyable about it. All the stuff that I buy and I have and I've collected and I show is all things that I'm drawn to for one reason or another, you know, but they affect me in a certain way. And I think when I went into galleries a lot, and the pretension comes from people not saying hello, people not saying, can I help you? You know, if you ask about a piece that's for sale or not, oh, it's not for sale. Like, it's just a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I think it should be more accessible than that. You know, I think, you know, people that are just getting into collecting, people that want some interaction with the experience of buying art, deserve more than quietly in silence walk around a gallery, nobody talk to them, and then walk out. That's just my feeling about it. I'd rather have it much more interactive. And so we always set out to have it be much more of an opening and a party and a celebration of the art that's welcoming to people than some kind of snooty, you don't get what we're doing here.
Did you run into that a lot early in your exploration of art?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and even now. I mean, you go into galleries. I mean, I'm in Gallery Row. You can go into any of these galleries. Very few times they might say hello when you walk in, and then that's it. There's no price list out. There's no, and it just feels off-putting. For me to experience art, yeah, you can do it in silence. You can do it in a bubble of your own, I guess. But it just seems to be, for me, I like more of an interaction about it. I like to discuss it. I like to hear more about the artist than just, try and find the courage to ask a salesperson about it. Yeah. Okay. So that was kind of the philosophy of it. The other thing is we don't rep artists. So it really is just about showing the work and celebration, not necessarily, but showing the work and allowing people to experience the art. And it's mostly through artists that I find, artists that I collect, actors that I know did art, and it's been a fun journey.
How do you go about finding artists?
Everything from knowing, like I did, James Franco's really his first show in the old gallery, and I just had read an article where he mentioned that he painted, and I pursued it, and I knew people that rep James, and so I kind of went down that road, and it varies. It varies from an artist that I was introduced to through somebody else to hearing about somebody that actually paints, or actors and people coming in and go, oh, did you know that I paint or I draw or whatever, and then going down that road. But it's also always about me being drawn to the work. Very few times have we done stuff that I just thought was a good business move or people would like, or
you're going off of gut instinct and what you
and
like,
finding the work interesting. Yeah,
that totally makes sense.
Yeah,
does that, because we're here to talk to you about casting. I wanted to start with that because it's everywhere here, and I love art as well. Has that colored your casting?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that. Maybe because it has to do with a gut reaction. Maybe that it has to do with some kind of intuition, why I'm drawn to a piece of art, why I'm drawn to a certain artist. Certainly is similar to me in the experience of being drawn to an actor. Sometimes you understand why, sometimes you don't. It could be confidence. It could be something new that you haven't seen. And those things are similar, I think, between art and artists, meaning actors.
Yeah.
What piques your interest is, at the end of the day, it's the only thing that I have as a brand is my taste, And so whether that be in art or whether that be in actors or in food or whatever, it is kind of, I'm at the center of that. And without it being the world according to John, there is something about me viscerally responding and empathizing and feeling something about all of those disciplines, and expressions of art.
How did you cultivate that? How did you cultivate because I mean, one of the impetuses of this show was because casting directors are tastemakers in this industry. They are the ones who are bringing to directors, bringing to audiences these faces, sometimes new, sometimes old, sometimes top of the game, sometimes they weren't even part of the game for a while and now they're coming back big. So how did you develop your taste?
Thank you first for acknowledging that, as casting directors. I mean, I think, it's part of the journey that we fight. It's part of the story that I think casting directors have to push back against. In some ways, directors, producers, whoever that is, they like to claim that as their own work. And without a casting director, most people wouldn't know any of those actors. And so it is about, our collaboration with people. It is about our taste being brought to the forefront. We may not ever be the final decision maker. And I think for me, I always feel like I have to have options. And, it's not as much my movie as it is our movie. And
Absolutely.
so,
just like it is any other position.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like I always have to have other alternatives and see things from all different sides. But, by and large, it is influencing a production, having it filtered through your sensibilities, how you receive the script, how you interpret those roles. It's all filtered through that. And I guess my idea or thoughts about taste and or how is that cultivated. I can remember when I first started in casting at the Mark Taper Forum here in Los Angeles, my taste was the same that day as it is now. Okay. And I always find that fascinating. I don't necessarily think people cultivate a taste. Yes, you cultivate a collection of actors, a dictionary of actors in your head that you can pull from. But I think I respond, and it's like art, what we were talking about, I respond to the same kind of things that I did then. Now, I was lucky enough, undergraduate school, I went for acting, I went to graduate school for acting. So I think it's based in that to some degree. But it's never about a personality or, oh, I like that actor, or I don't like that actor. To me, it's about trying to find something interesting that moves me about that actor.
Did you have a visceral response to?
Or that fits the role. I mean, you really do have a lot of gods to serve as a casting director.
Yeah.
And so some of it might not always just be my taste. It's also reading what a director wants, what a producer wants, and finding common ground among all that. Because I'm not the director. I don't get to make every call. If I cast everybody that I wanted, well, that's not necessarily the director's film, And so I think it's somewhere in between there that alchemy happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess when I ask about the cultivation process, that to me, I think that happens early in life. So let's take a step back from delving into that and talk about. Well, let's go to the beginning. Where are you from, and how did you know that you wanted to get into this industry?
That's a good question. I am from Florida. I was raised in West Palm Beach, Florida, and raised in a flower shop. And my parents owned a flower shop, and my grandparents before them. And it's interesting, you touched on it just a bit ago. And honestly, if I can say there's one common thread that I recognize that I'm now here, is that, and what I do, I feel on some level I was raised to be a casting director.
How's that?
In an emotional, psychological sense.
Okay.
In my family, I think I was always on alert to see, because things weren't spoken about necessarily. And so you had to observe where you were. You had to observe if you were safe, if you weren't safe. You had to observe whether you were in trouble or you weren't. Whether you were loved or you weren't. And
because the communication wasn't there, you had to observe that?
I think so. And it was somewhat of a painful childhood, lonely childhood for me. So I think out of that, I'm an incredible observer. I think it was also, I started working in restaurants when I was 12, 13, and worked my way through school and restaurants and graduate school and college. And then ended up running a lot of restaurants in New York, and I opened a restaurant in London, moved out here and opened restaurants for celebrity chefs, and I was in that world. And I still, owning a restaurant, it fascinates me, and even my staff here, fascinates me how unobservant most people are. And whether it's a crooked painting on a wall
that I have to crazy,
right, that you have to fix, or walking through a dining room when I ran restaurants, and I could see if some person, a diner, had an instinct that they needed something, had a moment of I'm doing a physical thing, but you can see anticipation or somebody looking for help. Or back in the day, whether it was a cigarette in an ashtray. I don't miss any of those things. And it's fascinating to me how even people here, there'll be a glass of water on the ground, everybody goes home. How do you not see that? How is it not picked? So those kind of observant kind of things. And I think it filters into art, it filters into all of that for me, that it's about observation and how I then filter that through myself and respond to it in a certain way. But I do think it came out of childhood. You know, it was like, how do I observe differently than most people? And I think it's a real attention. It's a horrible nightmare to go to dinner with me. My wife constantly is like, John, will you relax and stop looking around the dining room? But it is, I'm always keenly aware of those things going on around me. Yeah. And I think that certainly plays into being able to read actors, you know, physically, emotionally, all those things.
It's fascinating to me, the idea that early observation sticks with you. All of those things that we learn so early on when it comes to art, when it comes to the things that we like, the things that we dislike, they set you in who you are. Because
crazy, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
Because you say when you started at Mark Tabor,
yeah,
your taste hasn't changed since then.
Yeah, I don't think that. Now,
it may have grown, it may have expanded in different
That's
directions, and there are other things, but still that core, like you're going to react to the same things that you reacted to at that time.
Absolutely.
And that to me is just fascinating.
And in some things you never know why. And it's you don't know why you're drawn to certain things.
But it grabs you.
A face or a moment or a choice.
Or a painting or a...
Right.
Yeah.
But it does grab you in a certain way, and it's what you gravitate towards. You know, and yeah, being that, having my taste listened to or displayed or accepted and found value in is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, it is. It's the drug of I think this industry.
It is.
You know, when you get on stage and you can hear a pin drop and you're giving your soliloquy to the audience. Right. There's nothing better than that feeling, and I have to assume that feeling permeates as a director, as a casting director, as a producer, as a makeup artist. When somebody's like, "Hey, I saw what you did there, and that was fucking great.
Yeah,
well done."
Yeah,
that and it's. I don't think it's a look at me. I need to be. It's a validation of going into an industry that is very difficult. Yeah. To succeed in.
That's a smart idea. Yeah, because it's not so much for me as, and it's nice to get recognition. And of course, as human beings, we, crave it or like it or, but it's not so much that. I think it's more it is about recognition in the sense of you served this story well. You made this kind of world seem seamless. And I think, the best casting for me is always somewhat invisible. It's done with a light hand. Yeah. And so it's not about, look at me. In fact, most things, when I watch films or see films cast or shows, the stuff that's showy feels a little insincere to me. Whether a director's so manipulative in a film that you go, oh, he's constantly waving his arms, like, look at me, I'm here. Or
look how clever
casting
I
has
am.
done that, right? Yeah. Or casting does that. It pulls me out of it. I want to be immersed in something and go, wow, I got an entry into that world and I believed it all. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what really I try and do. And
well, you do it really well.
Well, thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about your early days as a casting associate and assistant.
Yeah.
You worked on some fairly large films, almost right out of the gate.
Yeah, after the taper, I went and started to work with, it was interesting because when I went to the taper, I had been running restaurants for years. Mm-hmm. And I just got to the point where I realized I'd always wanted to be in the entertainment business. And I felt like I didn't have, when I stopped acting, when I realized I got out of graduate school, I remember I went to a Diet Pepsi commercial in New York, and I was doing under fives and soap opera and stuff like that. And I went to a audition for a Pepsi commercial that was a takeoff on Top Gun. And I sat in this make-believe cockpit and cameras were on you. And I was acutely aware that, oh, I can't do this. It was not about talent. It was about, I think, now in hindsight, it was about a sense of ego. It was about a sense of, I deserve this and other people don't. It was about that confidence. And not about talent, because I had always been recognized as that through school and graduate school and stuff and scholarships. But it was about the idea that I couldn't walk into a room or stand in front of the camera and bare my soul every day and withstand it. You know, it's why I so respect actors and I have such empathy for actors, because it's a brutal, brutal process. You know,
is. And that seems to be a through factor with a lot of casting directors, is that they have a heavy empathy towards actors. Yeah. And I think that's important.
I mean, I think it's essential on some level. You know, it's funny, early on, I had done one commercial in my life, and it was a favor to a friend, and where I used to house my offices. And I said afterwards, I can't do this. In that, it's a brutal job, even more so than casting for film and television, I think. Because actors are a mere product. It's just...
It's look, feel, move on.
Just do what we want you to do, jump like a monkey, do this. It's just about that product. And it ignores the human being in it, I found in that experience. And so I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not doing that. But yeah, it is about the empathy. It is about trying to create a space where an actor can share a bit of their soul, you know, and that's really, I think, what the job is. And I think because I have come from a place where it is about my life has been emotional in the sense of identifying people and connecting with people and reading people, that I still apply that every day. I still feel that for actors. So I remember that experience and thinking, no, I can't do this. So I ended up running restaurants in New York, and then I moved out here and always felt like, I guess at the end of the day, though I was successful in the restaurant business running them, I felt like I had walked away from my dream of being in entertainment. And so it was in a process of, well, what do I want to do? I know I don't want to be an actor. I don't think I had the guts to say I wanted to be a director at that point. I knew I didn't want to be an agent or, you know, in development. And so my best friend from college was in casting, and I thought that's a great kind of fit. You know, I still get to be around actors. Business has always come easy to me, and it's a real blending of those things. And so I left running a big restaurant and started as an intern at the Taper. And Stanley Sobel, God rest his soul, was lovely and said, "Oh yeah, you should start." And the first day they said to me, "Oh, can you make sides? You got to take this to a copier." And I wasn't a kid. Like, I'd been running business. I was like, yeah, give me the papers. And I went over and I made copies. And in like a week or 10 days, they offered me an assistant position. And then I worked there for 2.5 years, and then ultimately started to work with other independent casting directors. And then became an associate for Mindy Marin. And that's really when I started to work on bigger movies, because Mindy was doing that. Yeah.
Because you worked at that time on Clear and Present Danger, Cutthroat Island, which I don't know what everybody hates about that movie. I love that movie. I was probably the demographic at that time. I was like 7 years old, and it was pirates.
Who doesn't want to see pirates?
Come on, and Gina Davis, and I enjoyed it. And what's interesting to me about that one is, 10 years later, 15 years later, Pirates of the Caribbean comes out.
Huge.
And it's massive.
It's kind of you to say that we were before our time.
I really think
that's the spin.
I kind of think it was before its time. Right. Then you were an associate on Anaconda.
Yeah. where you look back at that and you go, well, J-Lo and Jon Voight and Owen Wilson.
I mean, it's got a great cast.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you look at I
still don't know what Voight's accent is in that movie.
I'm not sure what that was either. John was on a Christianity bent. I mean, he really, I think, now remembering back, really focused on that's what he wanted his character to have, was a sense of religion about him, a sense of faith
that
about
comes through.
him. Yeah,
that absolutely comes through.
Which was not on the page, yeah, I mean, you look at that and you kind of go, wow, I'm partial to all of them, but I don't think there's a bad cast I've ever put together. But I think that probably has to do with the fact, plenty of people disagree with that, but it probably has to do with the fact that I like all those actors that I've been able to cast.
Or else you probably wouldn't have recommended them or put them forward for the role. So after those, the first movie that you set out on your own as a casting director was Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. That's a hell of a start.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, yes, now in hindsight, but at that time, Mike wasn't in the place where, he is heralded now, and people.
But he's still SNL royalty at that point in time.
Yeah, but Axe Murderer didn't do what they probably
which it
thought.
should have.
Which it should have.
Yeah.
And, look, it is the cyclical thing of this town. But reading that script, I mean, it was hysterically funny and interesting, and and I've not ever thought about this, but I wonder if many people had kind of been doing that kind of comedy in that day and age. I don't know. I can't think of a comparable thing where somebody was playing a character that strong and making a send up of it in a certain way.
Nobody outside of the SNL folks.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was a challenge at that point to convince people and get them in the process.
So convincing other actors to get on board.
Yeah, I mean,
really?
People either got it or they didn't, or were afraid of it, or
were there any that didn't get it, then got it, and then got the role?
Well, not in that process, but you look at and I only did the first one with Jay Roach, and then the second one came out, and I was like, oh yeah, now everybody gets it and they're on the bandwagon.
Yeah,
it was like
just
chock
throw
full
the
of
line out
stars. Yeah. But it's funny, first adapters and that kind of thing. The first one of a series is always the toughest one to get right and allow it to have a life after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and speaking of that one, I would be totally remiss if we didn't talk at least a little bit about the Batman Trilogy. And I think that the point that you hit on about Austin Powers, about hitting it in the first one that allows the rest of it to work, is really important. Do you have any idea of that when you're starting something like that? When you're going into Batman Begins with Christopher Nolan and you're casting an iconic character, iconic characters across the board in that movie?
I don't know that I had a real sense of it in the way that, this is going to be the 3-picture franchise that kind of rediscovers what that world is and resets the clock for it. It's just it always felt an incredibly important moment when I get to work with Chris and Emma, and now it's been 17 years or so that we've worked together.
A lot of great films.
Yeah, and that's really to Chris's credit. I mean, he's one of the brightest, smartest, most detailed person that I've met in the business. And the film is already in Chris's head before we even start. And
that helps.
Yeah, every shot, everything is already kind of there. So it's more about filling in the blanks for Chris than it is discovering what those roles are.
So with the trilogy of Batman, who was attached before you came aboard?
Nobody.
No.
I always feel like I'm the casting director that doesn't get that break. That so-and-so is attached.
Is that better or worse? Because I would think having a blank slate would be freeing.
Yeah, well, there's advantages and disadvantages. Yes, on the creative level of it's a blank slate, but there is the pressure of I've got to get this right and we got to make the movie happen.
Yeah.
And unless you have the right components to that, it could all fall apart, you know. And so there's an inherent pressure with that as well, as opposed to, oh, you've got one or two big stars and the movie's going, you know, you're just filling in around that.
Yeah.
So there was nobody attached to Batman at all.
So what is the first step in that process when you jump on board to that film?
It's happened pretty much with all the films that I've done with Chris, except Memento. Memento, Chris didn't know a lot of American actors. I mean, he was brand new here.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was probably one of the fastest casting processes because he was like, just bring me the people you like. Bring me your favorite people. And so it was very quick, you know, it was kind of like, oh, they're great. Yeah, they're great. So it was a very fast.
So it was easy to sell at that point.
Yeah, it was, you know, and he just chose people that he liked that, you know, I got in the room. It's become more complicated as that goes down because the budgets are bigger and things are, but it really always starts, for the most part, I read the script, they call me, I read the script, and we start to talk about, you know, those main characters and how he sees it, how I see it. We start to fill in those things about coming up with ideas, what might be right, what might be wrong, and then deciding on that. I mean, he's fairly decisive.
Are you deep diving as well into the back lore of Batman?
He had really done all that. He and Emma had really
so
done all that kind of stuff. You know, about the back lore. You know, the lore of the comic books, all that kind of stuff was, you know, brought to the table. Yeah. I knew it, having grown up around it, I knew, but I can't say that I'm a fanboy. I was not a comic book kid, you know, necessarily. And so it was really about reading the script and finding out how do you flesh out what's on the page and who's the right person to embody this, you know. I also think at that point, it was right after Spider-Man and the reboot with Tobey and that, you know, version of it. And so I think we had to figure out in that process too, do you want to follow that template of Batman becoming Batman as a young man growing into it, or is he already formed? And it was interesting because in that process we kind of learned through the script, the setup of the script was that he already had to fight Ra's al Ghul on page 15.
Yeah.
You didn't have a lot of time for him to grow up and believably have that conflict. So that dictated kind of how we then started to look at the role as well.
Okay. So
he needed to be more of a man and less of a boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it first starts with the script. Everything always starts with the script. Then conversations with the director, producers. How long is the process for a film like that when you're dealing with, I mean, Christopher Nolan, you did Dunkirk, you've done so many of his very iconic movies.
Yeah.
What is the length of that process?
It kind of depends, you know. I mean, on Dark Knight, I think we did 3 continents and 7 countries, and I never left my desk, but it was probably a year.
Okay.
You know, or close to it, 9-10 months, because even though they started shooting, I was still working on things.
And how long is that before we're seeing a movie? That's
a year and a half or so, maybe before the movie comes out.
By the time you're started?
Yeah.
Or by the time you're finished?
Finished, by the time I'm finished.
So you start 2.5 years, 3 years before anybody's seeing
Yeah, it was probably
your work.
2 years, 2.5 years on Dark Knight.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we're usually the first ones on.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's a badge of courage, but, you know, I'm usually one of the first ones that gets to read the script, you know, as a department head, which is always exciting, you know, which is always cool, you know.
When you're dealing with, especially when you're, I'm a bit of a fanboy of Christopher Nolan's. I have to admit that.
I am too.
I love his work.
Yeah.
Interstellar was one of my absolute favorites. I've read the original script when he was writing back with Kip Thorne. And
right.
Like
You know it.
I love, because he explores science fiction so well. And he loves the science part of science fiction.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the reasons that so much sci-fi doesn't hit everybody. If it has that concrete science background, then it feels more real. And you don't have to suspend disbelief as much.
Right, and I think it's a real tribute to audiences. You know, Chris is not fanatical, but very respectful of the process and takes film very seriously, in my experience of him. And nobody wants to shortchange the audience or figure out, oh, they'll not pay attention. There are no big leaps, like you said, of suspension of, disbelief. Like that science, I think, grounds it in a way. Yeah, I'm always shocked. First of all, just how smart he is, but secondly, the process by which, sitting down and talking to astrophysicists to get the science right and having a team of people that, talk to him about those things. I remember when we did The Prestige.
A movie that I just watched again last night. One of my absolute favorite movies.
I love the movie. But, we were sitting there one day and we were talking about it, and I remember Chris saying this to me, that talking about magic. And he said, well, I'm kind of the magician in the film. I was like, what? And he was like, well, I have to misdirect where everybody's looking.
The whole time.
The whole time throughout the film, because I can't show them my trick. And I sat there and listened.
The reveal, the prestige.
Right. And
sucks.
I sat there and listened to that, and I thought, okay, my head just went out. My brain just blew out of the back of my head. I can't even comprehend that kind of level of detailed thinking. Sure. But yeah, he was doing exactly what a magician does, is distract you so you don't see what's really happening.
And that's why I think his movies stand out and have stood out for so long, is because those levels and those layers and that attention to detail makes a movie rewatchable. If you watch something and it's given to you all through, it may be an enjoyable movie, but I'm not going to go back and watch it again because I got it all.
Yeah.
The Prestige, watching it again last night, I keyed in on so many things that I just totally missed the first few times that I viewed it.
Yeah, I think there's so many layers in his films, and it does come down to detail. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about, me noticing details. When I watch films, when I watch anything, it shocks me when people have no attention to detail. Whether it's an editing thing where, cups of, water go up and down, or the label is one way in a bottle and the label is not, those kinds of things, to major faux pas. And I just want to go, wait, as a director, what are you looking at? If you're not looking at details, you know what I mean? That's your canvas, that frame. To me, it should be perfect, is the goal.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then what are we watching? We're watching some facsimile of something that's real or not real. I don't know. To me, that's sloppiness.
And it's hard to get past that. It's
hard for me. Just the way my mind works, it is.
Yeah. Well, I heard a quote a long time ago, something that I try to hold on to, that is, if you pay attention to the details, the rest will take care of itself.
It's true.
I think what that's basically saying is, to figure out what the details are, you've got to go through all those other steps. But it's the process of going through all those steps where you figure out everything.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, if you just scratch the surface, then you're going to make a surface film. You're going to make a surface painting. And that doesn't speak to people because it doesn't have that.
I agree.
Yeah. So because we're talking to actors, because we're talking to directors, because we're talking to film lovers, I have to ask about Heath Ledger in this extremely iconic role.
Yeah.
Are there any things that stood out to you in the process of casting Heath in the role of the Joker that I know people railed against him with that movie? When it was first announced that Heath Ledger was going to be playing the Joker, everybody shit their pants. And why is this happening? This doesn't make any sense. He was in A Knight's Tale, another favorite movie.
You've never met a movie that you haven't liked.
If you ask pretty much anybody that I know, yes, I love movies, and I'll find beautiful things about every movie that I watch.
That's fantastic. That's a lovely quality to have.
I think so too.
I agree.
I go to a movie or to a television show to escape, to learn, to grow, to just imbibe another character. And it goes back to pretension. I think that there's a lot of pretentious people here in this town that when they go watch a movie, they shit all over it. because they read the book and the book was way better. The animated version was so much better.
Right.
Well, then, yeah, of course, it was a different thing. This is a different thing. And expectation, for me, I think is key on that. Like, I go into movies with zero expectation. Yeah,
that is a fantastic quality to have. I mean, I wish I had more of it,
Yeah.
But it's hard, I say this a lot to my wife mostly. It's hard to judge all day long and then turn that off. And so
that's a good point.
I find it hard to turn it off in other places of my life, whether it's going to see a movie, whether it's eating out, whether it's whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's hard not to turn that eye that is constantly like, yes, no, turn it off.
To not be critical.
Yeah, not be critical, not judge what I'm viewing, and just be open to it.
I mean, I think for me at least, I can be critical of things, but I try not to have that set as my default. And that's probably a lot easier for me because my job isn't being super critical of literally every person that comes up and reads for you, because you have to be, then that's your job.
Right, that's my job.
And you have to be at the level that you're at, you have to be good at that.
Yeah.
But going back to, no worries at all. We'll go on all sorts of tangents. With Heath Ledger, what was that audition like, and what was working with him on that role like? And I guess, what did he come to the table with?
Well, I think it has to be framed in the sense that we talked about ideas, we talked about guys that could do it and that were right. And it was a short list. I mean, and we went after a couple of guys and at least exposed them to it, had a meeting kind of thing. And shockingly, most guys were afraid to step into the Jack Nicholson shoes. Now, we found that with Batman initially too. There were plenty of guys that didn't want to step into Batman's shoes.
Okay.
It's going to be too limiting. I don't want to be the guy in a mask. It's going to be silly. All those kinds of things.
Because everybody had seen the Joel Schumacher version.
I mean, it comes with its baggage, good and bad.
Yeah.
And so the same thing with the Joker. I think a lot of actors were intimidated about, well, I don't want to do some version of what Nicholson had done because that's so iconic. And Heath came in, had a meeting with Chris, never read, had a meeting with Chris, and he was fearless. He didn't have those same fears about it. He was a guy that was like, put his hand up and said, I can do this. And, and I think between the two of them, they came up with this idea that it was not the wink, wink, nod that had been done with the Joker.
Sure.
That he was really an anarchist. And I think Chris brought up that idea of anarchy, that it's not humor that he's after, it's his own internal humor of what he finds funny. And that was anarchy. That was just to tear the system down. And so it wasn't so much about, how the Joker had been interpreted of, he's funny and he likes jokes and, that kind of thing. Wasn't about humor. It was about a societal mischief and a societal kind of abandon that he wanted to destroy. And I think, Heath really got that and talked about it. And that was that.
And came in fearless.
Yeah.
I think that's a big takeaway,
Yeah.
is not being afraid of it, even though there's a lot of reasons to be afraid in that situation.
But I also think it also probably, I would make up that being in the hands of somebody like Chris Nolan, it's an easier leap to take,
Yes.
At least that's how I saw it.
Yeah.
He's not going to make you look like a fool. It is going to be thought through. The film is going to have a certain tone to it. All those things.
And with that movie, because that's the second of the trilogy, where is that taking place on the timeline of these movies? Had Batman Begins come out already?
Yeah, Batman Begins had come out.
So it came out.
It came out.
So he went in knowing, all right, the tone is this.
Yeah, he wanted to make it dark and serious and more like a graphic novel, more what the what the comic books were like, rather than certainly the Adam West version on television, certainly where the kind of winky, versions of it had gone in the Joel Schumacher films. It was, how do you reset this franchise and make it something different and original that we hadn't really seen?
I love those movies.
Yeah.
And I've got so many movies to talk about, so we're going to go through a couple more.
Okay.
I definitely want to talk a bit about Dunkirk. It won a few Oscars. It was nominated for a bunch more. It was beautiful. The cast across the board looked and felt like that period. First off, why the fuck isn't there a casting Oscar?
We ask ourselves that every day. Again, I touched on it. I think a lot of things about it, but I do think that producers, directors are afraid to give that up to someone else. Everybody wants to own ideas. It's my film, it's my idea, and it goes back to that collaborative, philosophy. And I think it's tough for an institution that has basically run on that premise for, forever.
Yeah.
To then people, there are directors that won't call casting directors. They'll say casting people. It's insulting, and I would never work with somebody like that. And now I also think that casting directors in the past, we have our own part in that I don't think necessarily everybody's conducted themselves in the most professional manners at times. Okay. And tried to be viewed as professionals. I think, on some level it became a found profession. And since there is no real training ground for it, people discarded it as, oh, well, yeah, it was somebody that was interested in being a producer's assistant that, after the studio system just started to do this. And I think that's changing now. I think people aspire to be casting directors. So I think the level of professionalism, how it's viewed, is different. But it takes time to turn that ship, And when directors and producers push back on that no, I made the decision. Well, yeah, you chose a wig too, and an outfit, but you still have wardrobe and costume people getting Oscars. I think it's one of the most essential. Of course, I'll feel this way. There's no movie without an actor. You've got nothing to shoot, and without this collaboration of a casting director, you don't have a movie. And so for me, it's a huge exclusion. It is a huge misstep that we are an essential, huge part to everything in a film, and what those lives end up being. Because, even the process is a camera captures the essence of a person. That is what you're trying to do in movies, Tell a story, but you can't do it without actors. And, so I don't know why there isn't. Hopefully one day there will be. I think it should be sooner than later. It's hard to believe that, it's not, but here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So with Dunkirk,
yeah,
you've got Tom Hardy, Cillian Murphy, Kenneth Branagh, Harry Styles pops up in there, who surprised me about a quarter of the way through the movie. I was like, is that?
That's Harry.
That isn't.
Yeah.
Damn, he's good.
Yeah.
What sort of things do you do to research this kind of project that is set in a different period, that is historically accurate to what was happening at the time, and a really big moment in history for a lot of people who are still alive? There are people who were I don't know if there are people who were at Dunkirk who are still alive. I assume there are.
Yeah, might be.
But we're teetering
young.
on the
I don't know
edge
if they
of that
were
right now.
Yeah, I don't remember whether or not I heard that Chris and Emma had met with anybody that actually was involved with Dunkirk or not. I can't remember that. It seems like they did, but I don't remember that exactly.
I think if they were alive, then I'm sure they probably would have met with.
Yeah. I think that, from the very outset, we talked about the tone of the film, but also how we would cast it. That, we didn't want it to be known faces. Chris and Emma had pitched the movie really to Warner Brothers as not having any recognizable people in it, because it was about this experience. It wasn't about stars, you know, and really, when I first read the script, which was short, you know.
Because there's a lot of silence in that movie.
A lot of silence in the movie. I mean, you look at it now and it's so thin on dialogue.
It is.
I'll go back to that for 1 second. Sure. The fact that it wasn't more recognized with awards kind of blows me away.
Agreed.
I feel like if you compare that as a director, a task as a director, that film compared to the others, I don't even think it's a competition. I mean, you know, you're talking about a film that not only visually was what it was, experientially is what it was, but that then was working on 3 different time frames and playing with time. And putting that together, to me, is monumentally more difficult than people talking. Anyway, so I'm partial, but I do think that it was very overlooked for the kind of film that it is. But we talked about, we wanted it to feel real. We wanted it to feel like it was about the experience, not about tracking actors through it. And then through conversations, and Chris had talked to somebody that said, well, maybe each storyline, there can be one solid person that we kind of follow, one known person. And so then it kind of morphed into that. And, you know, how do we follow Tom Hardy's storyline? How do you follow Ken Branagh's storyline? Mark Rylance's storyline? So it really then became about putting a people in each situation, each location of the story, that we could follow their, you know, journey. You know, how do you follow Finn's journey? And that's what became the objective. You know, can we keep it as real as possible without pulling people out of it, and only tracking the story and the timeline through one common denominator in that segment?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started to evolve. And then a lot of it is just feeling your way through it. You know, you look at people and you go, he's too contemporary. He speaks too contemporary, or his mannerisms are too contemporary. You start to then sort through that.
And by the time you're done with the process, I assume you've got it. Nope.
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah. There was a lot of that.
Yeah.
And everybody's got, you know, I mean, Chris would feel different about people. Emma would feel different about people. I would at times. But ultimately, once it all started to get down to, we ended up doing callbacks in London and having people mix and match and read with different combination of actors. And by the time it got down to that, you could start to see, oh, this combination of people really works. Oh, that person stands out. Regardless if they're reading with 3 other people, you're watching that person. So it really started to come together about the final ensemble, about how all those pieces fit together and how those actors worked amongst each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that a process that you've used multiple times? Do you use that often?
Yeah, I mean, we did it on Power Rangers, not to skip big genre movies that I've done, but we did it on Power Rangers. Yeah, we did it on Power Rangers. Sure, you want to see, you know, chemistry. You want to see how people interact with one another, and especially when it's an ensemble, you want that feeling that they work together. Yeah, you know, and that you got the chemistry of it right. So yeah, I've done it a bunch of times, but certainly on Dunkirk, it was really instrumental.
So I guess we can hop off the Christopher Nolan train for a little bit. As much as I could.
Okay, what? You want to talk about Bubble Boy? Okay, go ahead. No.
Actually, yes. No. I kind of want to talk a little bit about Imposter, because every time I do these, I try to watch something that I haven't seen before and that I haven't heard of before. Imposter I hadn't seen or heard of before. It is, for those of you listening who aren't familiar, it is a Philip K. Dick story. It's got Gary Sinise, Vincent D'Onofrio, Madeline Stowe, and it is very Philip K. Dick. Yeah. Which is in vogue right now. Yeah. A lot of
before its time.
I think it was before, I really do think it was, because I read about the release schedule of this movie and how that got all fucky.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that.
Well, apparently, it was supposed to come out during Christmas, but because the studio had another movie that they wanted to put out, it got moved
kicked back, yeah.
And it had also been shelved before that was supposed to even happen.
Yeah.
So I definitely, because there were a lot of movies around this era that were happening at that time, and they were, and I think that this movie holds up just as well as those movies do.
Yeah.
I could go back and watch Total Recall at any time.
Right.
This movie I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I think Gary Fleder's the director, and I think he did an amazing job with the film. I really love that film.
Yeah.
And I think all the performances are really good.
I think D'Onofrio was
fantastic.
Like that's after he'd done Men in Black, after he had done some other things that were a little bit bigger commercially, but in this one he really got to like stretch as being a badass and being a hard ass and did it beautifully.
Yeah, I wonder, was that before or after The Cell, that movie? The
Cell was what, 2014? No, 4?
No, 4 maybe.
I think 2004?
It was around that time, maybe. I don't remember if it was before or after, because he was such a, weird, horrible kind of character in that. But no, Vincent was fantastic. And, look, I read that script and I loved it. And it is weird how some things look. I mean, I'm always amazed that anything comes out and is successful. That, so many times, films that I've done came out on a bad weekend. There's a snowstorm and people don't show up. There's Columbine and films don't open. And especially where it seems like in this day and age, there's always something on the news cycle. There's always something happening. It's an amazement to me. They can market it wrong, it can be cut wrong, or it can just be weather. And the fact that everybody, films that get through all those hurdles and then are huge successes, always fascinating to me.
What's even more fascinating to me is the people who consistently get past
right
all
through
of those hurdles.
Yeah.
That's what I aspire to. That's what, but that is a gold in the middle of a wheat field. It's true. It's hard to achieve that.
It's hard, and to keep that batting average, to keep that is unbelievably hard. And I think it then comes down to working harder to keep it up, probably like in anything else. You know what I mean? If you have a amazing season as a quarterback in football or an outstanding season batting in baseball, you got to double down and work harder to continue that. And I think I certainly see that with Chris and his films. It becomes about doing it better and better and better and better and upping the game every time.
Yeah. Past Imposter, like I said, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. And I got a chance to work with Mr. D'Onofrio last year. I was cast in a film that he was directing in New Mexico. And what's really interesting to me about this one and about his character that he like the characters that he's playing right now, the characters that from The Cell onwards that he was playing, he's always this big, imposing, and he's a big guy.
He's a big guy, yeah.
But he is the sweetest, most understanding person that I've worked with, for sure.
That's lovely, yeah.
And it was kind of magical to see those two differences and to see, because one of my favorite actors is James Cagney. James Cagney.
Mayor of Hell. Did you ever see Mayor of Hell?
No, I haven't.
You should see it. It's a great movie. It was one of my favorite movies growing up. Was a Cagney movie. Yeah, for me, Jimmy Stewart, James Cagney, were all my favorites growing up.
With Cagney, what was so interesting to me is he played, Public Enemy is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
He played a horrible human being.
Horrible.
And a lot of characters he played were horrible. But apparently, he was the exact opposite. And that, I think, is...
It's a fascinating thing that I talk to actors a lot, about, is that, people are only given the opportunity. Actors are not always given the opportunity to play what they're able to play or capable of playing, but what they're allowed to play. And I think, it's a horrible kind of pigeonholed thing this business does, is that it puts people in a box and then wants them there. If I know who you are, then I might know where I am in the world. Remember going to see Fifth Element. And I remember sitting in the dark theater, and I think I was alone. I was looking at it, and I thought, well, there's Bruce Willis doing pretty much what he did on Moonlighting, just in a different outfit. You know what I mean? And I thought, well, isn't that fascinating? And where do other people, like, people want Stallone to be Stallone.
Yes, they
people
do.
want, want Bruce Willis to be Bruce Willis. I don't know that they would want to see Bruce Willis do a transgender small love story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Absolutely.
But I think there is something about the phenomenon of viewing films and watching movies. Whereas if I know who you are, then something's right in the world. I know where I am, and it's something that actors have to deal with all the time.
And it's something that you, as a casting director, has to take into consideration
For
when
sure.
you're casting someone.
For sure.
How does that play up against wanting to cast somebody who is opposite of type?
It's usually a huge hurdle.
Yeah.
You have to be around a collective group of people, a director that sees it, a producer that supports it, a studio that will allow it. You have to be all on the same page to make that kind of thing happen. Or else, you're a voice in the wind, and more as film becomes about more marketing, in this day and age of superhero movies and, Marvel and, that world of films, it becomes harder and harder to do, because it is about selling that product. It's about making a toy that then gets bought. It's about all those things. And it's not necessarily, independent films hopefully do this. The advent of Netflix and everything that is on now.
The opening of all these OTT
all
services.
this, I think gives you the opportunity, which is an amazing thing. And hopefully actors feel that opportunity opened up to them, rather than shut down more and more. Because very few people, Philip Seymour Hoffman played what he was capable of playing.
Yeah.
Meryl Streep gets to play what she's capable of playing. Maybe Hopkins.
Daniel
maybe,
Day-Lewis.
Yeah, Daniel Day.
There's 10
it's
of them.
a handful. Everybody
Yeah.
else is playing a version of who they are.
Yeah.
And while that's great, it's also a misnomer to how most actors are trained. Most actors are trained to believe you can play anything.
Yes.
That's fine in theater, but in film and television, we're going to go find the person. We need somebody 80, we'll go find an 80-year-old person.
Yeah.
You're not going to play that. You're not going to put on a wig and pretend like you're 80.
Unless you're James Dean and
Right.
the biggest thing in the world
Right.
at the time.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
that reality check, I think, is
Yeah.
important for actors listening.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. And so it's almost like the more you know yourself, the more you can have confidence in who you are, the more you stand to gain, I think. And I think
Absolutely.
academia and studying acting does a real disservice to actors. It's fine to explore all those realms, but really sometimes it's like, it's not about a black dress on Tuesday and what you're going to wear in an audition. It's about know who you are. It's about know your soul. Go read a book of psychology. Go read a book about philosophy and incorporate that into your being, because that's going to individualize you more than, luck or an outfit or the time of day or any of that.
Absolutely.
It's about being an individual,
Yeah. So everyone out there, go pick up, let's see, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Let's get some Carl Jung.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start.
It is.
And we'll go from there. So I did want to talk about one of the shows that you've got, two of the shows that you've got going on right now. One that was last year. It's on Netflix right now. Manhunt, Unabomber. Holy shit, that show's great. I started it in preparation for this. I'm going to watch an episode or two. I'm 6 episodes in and I can't stop watching it now. Paul Bettany is amazing in the show.
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't recognize him for the first couple scenes that I saw him in.
Yeah.
I saw his name in the credits and I was like, where's he coming
where's
in this
Paul?
show? Where's Paul?
Where's Paul?
I love him.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
his performance is just staggering.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you land on him for that role?
We talked about, it always starts with discussions. I mean, I have to say, Greg Utanis that directed, and the writing in that series is just fantastic. It's really, really good. And I remember sitting there and reading it and going, well, that's a huge part of the heavy lifting. When you have material like that and you get to expose it to people, it's out of the norm, And so I was lucky in that, the material was fantastic and it spoke to actors. We talked about Paul because he's such a chameleon.
Yes, he is.
And when we started talking about, yes, Ted had a certain physique and he had a certain look and all those things, but it wasn't about so much as that as about his essence, and talking about somebody that could be lonely and isolated and super intelligent and passionate and driven and all those things that he was in his deranged way. And Paul kind of started to check all those boxes, that's somebody that he could transform himself into this, and I honestly got lucky that his manager read it and loved it and sent it to Paul, and he was like, yeah, I'd love to do it. So sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes it really helps start to inform everything else. I remember when we said Sam and Paul were doing it, people were like, oh, what? They stand up and take notice, and then that helps you get Jeremy Bobb, and it helps you get,
he's a horrible person in the show, but
he's great.
Holy shit, he's good.
Yeah,
his performance is so good in that show.
I think so
really
too.
Steals some scenes every now and again, which
I agree.
Is great.
Keisha Castle Hughes was great. It was, I can't say charmed, but I think, we put up, we took big swings at people, and what we were supported with was a great script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other show coming out, season 2, later this year. Everyone's stoked about it. We've actually had one of the writers from this show on one of our other podcasts, Charles Yu.
Fantastic.
And it was lovely talking with him. The show that I'm talking about is Westworld, everybody. You've got such an amazing cast across the board in this show.
Thank you.
Evan Rachel Wood, Tandy Norton, Jeffrey Wright, James Marsden, Ed Harris, Sir Anthony Hopkins, Tessa Thompson, and on and on and on and on and on. And there's more coming. One of the things that stood out, and we had a little bit of a conversation with Charles about this, is how much diversity there is in this world that's created. And a diversity that didn't necessarily exist in the Western times.
Right.
How much of that comes from the casting process and your side of things, and how much of that was written in?
Jonah and Lisa, again, Jonah Nolan, Lisa Joy, who created the show, it's the offspring of the Nolans. So, I mean, it's smart and extraordinary and a lot of things. But so they certainly had opinions about how they saw it and what we hope to achieve with it. I think that we did all kind of agree we wanted it to be a version of the future that was inclusive of people, and not necessarily a historical recreation of the Old West, but the experience of the Old West. And so, it certainly came and went, but we wanted it to be, representative of what a future we could imagine be like and have it in that world. And so, not only being caring about envisioning it that way, but to make it a real practicality and kind of try and be as colorblind as we could with all those roles.
So the process in casting, were you seeing all ethnicities for everything across the board?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you seeing more and more of that happening?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people are certainly aware of it. It's funny because, the idea of access to ethnicity and access for those actors to be in shows, it falls on casting directors' shoulders to some degree, and people think it's all that, but really is about the writing, and it's about those creators that then are open to it or aren't, You know, it always is shocking to me that, you know, at times you'll talk to people and like, oh, no, they're definitely, no, they got to be this, you know, and that comes from people that we answer to. You know, it's not just willy-nilly that we kind of go, oh, well, this character can be African American, or this character could be Asian, or yes, you try and push that agenda along when you can and when it serves the story, or it's a toss-up. But again, like I said, you also have to have receptive people on the other end of that. And particularly in television, I find it a little hard, you know, because,
why is that?
Well, because people, I don't know why. It's first of all, because it's a writer's medium and writers have the last word on it.
Writers are notoriously opinionated.
Exactly. And because they created
because they've lived in that world that they've created.
That's right. And so you find it to be more opinionated in the sense of, no, that's not what that is. And my attitude as a casting director is a little bit more like, okay, you wrote it a week ago, change it. You know what I mean? Why, what is it? You know, why are we so married to it? But it does come out of, it was somebody's vision in their head and they put pen to paper and, well, not anymore, but you know, they wrote it. And so they're married to those ideas. And breaking that can be tougher than most people think. Yeah. You know.
Are there any tips that you have for people who want to be in casting? Who are even thinking about being in casting? Because you said you were an actor before. I know a lot of the casting directors we've talked to either came from the world of acting or came from the world of theater. What do you have for somebody who is kind of teetering on the edge of, I don't know if I want to be an actor anymore. I don't know if I want to, but maybe casting could be a thing.
Look, it's provided me an incredibly, I feel incredibly blessed that, you know, the moments that stick with me are when I feel like I'm in the presence of an artist. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, what's the worst audition you've ever seen, or what are the... That's not what necessarily sticks with me. It's those moments where I see an actor make a choice that gives me chills, or a moment where I just sit and talk to somebody and I feel like this is an extraordinary human being for whatever reason. Those are the things that stay with me. And to say that you do that as a profession, to sit and kind of, even talking to you, like, this is my job.
Yeah, it's pretty rad.
Right. I'm from Florida. I could be digging ditches.
I'm from Arkansas.
You could really be digging ditches.
Well, that's what my brother does. That's his job, is literally digging ditches.
Right. And I think, you know, so I feel incredibly fortunate that that I've been able to, you know, exist, make a living, have a career in something that is so extraordinary and help storytellers tell their story, put something on a screen, collaborate with, you know, directors and producers, and figure out how best to tell their stories and realize their dreams and visions. And so to me, it's incredibly rewarding, you know, and it doesn't mean that it's a skip down the lane. Like, there's a lot of people that you have to get on this, you know, it's really managing people in a lot of ways. You have to get everybody on the same page. You know, and that can be incredibly difficult. Now, it's also how I believe the job should be, at least how I do it, that it is that kind of collaboration. I'm not the person that's like, you're wrong, this is who you should cast, and blah, blah, blah.
It has to be a little bit more diplomatic than that.
Yeah, I'll always give you my opinion, whether you want to hear it or not, but ultimately, it's their choice. You know, it's not up to me to demand a director or a producer or somebody else cast a certain person. You know, I will always give you my opinion and tell you what I think is best, but ultimately they have to decide that. It's, you know, it's their film.
Yeah. I've got 1,000 more questions, but I think we've got to wrap it up. Right. I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
Sorry, I rambled on a lot.
No, not at all. I always over-prepare for these things because I start and I can't stop, because I really enjoy
Three more things, just name three things that you researched.
Ben Hur.
Yeah, okay, keep going.
Actually, I wanted to quickly talk about Pillow Asbeek.
Oh, yeah.
He was perfect in the role of
Philo
Project
Asbeck. He's a fantastic actor, extraordinary actor.
So good.
Yeah. Look, I'm always the guy that likes a challenge. So people go, oh, do you want to do the television version of Charlie's Angels? Do you want to do Dumb and Dumber? Do you want to do Ben-Hur? Do you want to?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a challenge. How can I recreate what that was? Doesn't always work out the best, but
you're willing to step up and take that challenge.
I like a challenge.
And I think that is one of the reasons that you operate so highly, is because, like Heath Ledger, not being afraid of stepping into something that may blow up in your face.
Yeah.
Honestly, it very well could have. Heath Ledger could have come in, could have done his Joker, and tons of people could have been like, that's not Joker.
Yeah,
Joker
Harry could have blown up in our face. Harry Styles could have blown up in our face.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's about taking risks, but for me, it's also about, well, how do I keep it fresh and passionate and care about what I want to do? And so it comes down to that, like, well, yeah, I don't want to be safe. I mean, and I like challenges. So I'm the dope that signs up for them.
I appreciate that. I really do. And again, thank you, John Papsidera, for having us in your office today.
Anytime.
To discuss this. And you just said it. I'm going to hit you up again. We're gonna have another conversation.
Oh my God,
just like
so
this.
many more things to say. No, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in and asking.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
All right.
There it is, another episode of Placing Faces in the Bag, and I think this one was a really good one. What do you think? Would love to hear from you if you've got any thoughts, comments, questions. What casting directors would you like to hear from next? What films and TV are interesting to you? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, love, heart, thumbs up, and share with every single person that you know. Tune in for next week's episode when we chat with Angelique Midthunder, a local casting director coming at us from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And I mean, we've all felt the heartbreak of when you even work on something and then you don't even know that you ended up on the cutting room floor, and you go to the premiere with your mom and dad, and then you're not even in the movie, and your best friend is like, I thought you said you were in this movie. I mean, it happens to everybody.
Placing Faces is powered by Collaborator.com, a media production service connecting media professionals to companies, brands, and agencies, allowing you to scale your production based on your needs. Video professionals find work and companies save money. We'd also like to thank our partners at the Casting Society of America for helping to introduce us to so many of our guests. They also serve as a hub of information about this branch of the film and television industry. To learn more about the Society and what it takes to get into casting, you can visit www.castingsociety.com. Thanks for listening.